Hello BookTube, my name is Kate and this is my channel, Chapter Kate. This is another video in my Reading as Self-Care series. And today I'm going to be talking about reading for validation. But first, let's look at the definition of validation from our good friend Google. Validation is the action of checking or proving the validity or accuracy of something. Now, if we look at the emotional aspect of this, recognition or affirmation that a person or their feelings or opinions are valid or worthwhile. So if you're looking for books that make you feel validated, then you're probably going to want to look for books that reflect some part of you, or books that take some part of you and spin it in a way that makes it beautiful, or a book that acknowledges some part of you. So sometimes people look for validation in places if they feel like they haven't gotten it in their support system throughout life. And these might be validation in different ways. Like, I might feel valid as a person, but I might not feel validated in my ability to cook so much. But that's fair, because I'm not good at it. Or I might feel validated in the way that I look, but not in the way that I sing. Or I might feel validated about one aspect of a skill that I have, but not in my existence. So if you're looking for books that make you feel validated, you could be looking for any aspect of who you are. And a lot of times you're going to feel this if you see yourself represented in a novel. And this could be any part of you. This could be your personality, this could be the way you look, this could be your background, this could be something that you live with, something that you've experienced. And so here are a couple of the books that make me feel validated, books that I read for validation. The first book is Lost Boy by Christina Henry. Christina Henry is known for having really dark fairy tale retellings, and I absolutely love her writing. However, I will say it's also super triggering. And even though this book is something that did trigger me, it also validated me. I'm not one that thinks that you should just avoid things that trigger you. I do believe you should tread carefully. Know going in that it does have that element, and also prepare yourself for that. In this book, there's a character and he exhibits a lot of signs of PTSD. And even though it's not explicitly said that he has PTSD or, acknowledges that he is traumatized, his experiences I can see myself in, and so I felt validated in the way that I feel about certain things because of reading this book. This book is actually told from the perspective of a young Captain Hook, and so he's growing up on this island with Peter, and it talks about that Peter brings these kids to this island telling them that there are no rules. And one really harrowing sentence on the back of this is, Peter promised we would all be young and happy forever. Peter lies. And this shows how Captain Hook went from being his best friend as a child to his greatest enemy as Captain Hook. The next book I might read for validation is A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. Just the series in general. There's a character named Delilah Bard. She goes by Lila. And honestly, just her way of thinking about things, I feel myself reflected in a lot. Her relationship with who she is and how she fits into society, I really, really connect with that. I've seen a lot of people talk about Delilah having that not like other girls trope because she feels very uncomfortable with, being perceived that way and being perceived as feminine. I see myself in that as well. So I think that's why I felt validated by this story. If you have not read A Darker Shade of Magic, it's a magical place. In this book, there are 4 different Londons. There is Black, White, Grey, and Red London. So Grey London is the London here in our plane of existence, and Red London is where Kel is from. Kel's an Antari, and he can travel between worlds. And he ended up in Grey London and kind of ran into Lila, and there was a scuffle, and there was chaos ensues from there. Kel is from Red London, and Red London is just, there's magic out the wazoo. Everything is magical and bright and luscious, and yeah. Whereas Grey London, there's no magic there. There are people that are always searching for magic, but there's no magic. But I really, really enjoy this series. It has a lot of cool representation. It has a really cool magic system. If you like the magic of like Avatar: The Last Airbender, where there's different elemental magic, then I think you would enjoy it. And it's just really fun. The next book that I might read for validation is A Tragic Kind of Wonderful by Erik Lindstrom. This is the first book that I ever read that had bipolar disorder representation. And honestly, even like the smallest things in this book made me emotional, because there are aspects of bipolar disorder that we don't really talk about. We talk about, the mania and feeling, off the chains and doing impulsive things and spending all this money and doing dangerous stuff. And we talk about depression, and, a lot of people are familiar with what depression is. But there are just small intricacies to bipolar disorder and small little feelings that I feel people don't really know about and think about, but when I read this book, I could see them reflected in this person. And it's things that you might not catch if you haven't experienced it or haven't had experience with someone who, actively talks about these small things. The main character has bipolar disorder, her brother has bipolar disorder, her aunt has it. Bipolar disorder is genetic if you didn't know. It's something that's very strongly correlated in families. And this just touched on so many things that I was like, yes, I see myself, I see that. And this book is also med positive, which I don't see in a lot of books. So it's nice to see someone who, takes medication and, a book that talks about medication in a positive way. Because I feel like not talking about medication in a positive way can be very, very harmful for people who rely on it to live. I know when I see, negative things about medication in media, it makes it really hard for me to take my medication, and when I don't take my medication, I'm not in a great place. I'm not safe. I don't live my life to the fullest. And I do want to live my life. My medication allows me to do that. So I really did enjoy this book. The next book that I might read for validation is The Poetics by Elizabeth Acevedo. You may ask, how does a white young adult from South Carolina feel validated and represented in a book about a young Dominican American teenager who lives in Harlem? Well, let me just tell you, Elizabeth Acevedo's writing has a way of making things and situations that might be looked at as trivial or not important. She makes you feel the emotion that someone feels in that moment. Just like a small example, and this is actually an example from With Fire on High, but she does it in here too. Just small things like someone making a slight comment, someone looking at you a certain way, a teacher calling on you and you getting something wrong. The emotion that you would feel in that moment, like I remember in high school, if I ever even got in trouble, like I would feel so sick to my stomach and my face would be red, and it was just like, it would ruin my entire day. And even though that seems so trivial, it's something that would literally just like destroy me for the rest of the day. And the Poetics really shows things like that. Elizabeth Acevedo like adds so much emotion to these everyday situations that do impact you and impact the way your mood is. On top of that, the main character, Siamata, she has a very hyper-religious mother. I grew up religious, I'm still religious, but I also grew up in a very conservative family where a lot of things were not okay. And so I definitely could see myself and see that represented in this book and validated the way that that feels. And so I really enjoyed that aspect of this and felt validated by it. And then the last book that I might read for validation is An Unkindness of Magicians, which is my favorite book if you didn't know that. It's my favorite book. This book is by Kat Howard. And this book takes place in New York, but there's also another, magical world in New York that, the everyday people can't really see. And in this magical world, something is going wrong with magic. Spells and acts that would usually be simple are suddenly wrong. There are these, houses of the big influential people, and there's this big competition. I love magic competitions, and each house has a representative, and it's great. The main character's name is Sydney, and she's actually the representative from one of the houses, so she's competing in this competition. Main character Sydney is a representative from one of the houses, so she's competing in the magic competition. But she has a past that's dragging her down, and she's been through a lot. So to me, this book is a story of resilience, and that's something that I relate to because I feel like I've been through things and I've survived them, and it makes me feel like a stronger person. And I know that could be sometimes a harmful rhetoric, to say that someone has to go through something to have character development, and that's not true at all. But I do feel like I am a strong person because I've survived the things I've been through, and I felt really validated by that aspect of this book. And those are 5 books that I read for validation. Let me know below books that you have felt validated by, books that you read for validation, books that you feel represent who you are. But that's all for this video. If you would like more of this junk, subscribe below. Bye! Tripping over shadows and I'm drowning